It was late, like one of those nights where the parking lot lights feel too bright and everything else feels kind of muted. I was sitting in my car, engine still running, phone in my hand, and an email popped up with a receipt. Nothing dramatic. 20 something dollars. The kind of number your eyes slide over without sticking. I remember thinking, yeah, that sounds right, and swiping the notification away before the screen even finished lighting up. That moment stuck with me later. Not because of what I bought, but because of how fast I dismissed it. I didn't feel reckless. I didn't feel out of control. I just felt done for the day. And that's usually when it happens, when you're tired enough that you don't argue with yourself anymore. You don't even justify it. You just accept it. I've had a lot of nights like that. Enough that they blur together. Enough that the money starts to feel theoretical instead of real. I've noticed my brain has this habit of rounding things down without asking permission. $18 turns into like 15. 32 becomes basically 20 something. It's subtle. It doesn't feel like lying. It feels like smoothing the edges off numbers so they don't bother you. I used to trust that feeling. If it didn't sting, I assumed it didn't matter. But when you do that over and over, you're not ignoring money. You're reshaping it into something softer than it actually is. I caught myself saying, that's basically nothing, about stuff that clearly wasn't nothing. It was just nothing emotionally. And that's the part that messes with you, because nothing feels safe. Nothing doesn't need attention. I didn't notice how often I leaned on that trick until I tried to remember where the money went. I could remember the feeling, I couldn't remember the purchases, and that gap started to feel uncomfortable. Subscriptions are the quietest thing in my financial life. They don't arrive with a box. They don't interrupt my day. They just sit there month after month, politely taking their cut. $9 here, $13 there. A couple that jumped to 20 without me really noticing. None of them felt wrong on their own. That was the problem. I remember opening my bank app once and scrolling longer than I expected. Not because the total was shocking, but because I couldn't remember agreeing to half of it. When you add them up, it's not dramatic. It's just heavier than you think. $200 a month becomes $2,400 a year. That's not a crisis. It's just real. And real is harder to ignore. I didn't cancel anything right away. I just sat with the list longer than I wanted to. There was this low-grade annoyance, like realizing you've been carrying something in your pocket for years without knowing why. Food delivery is where I'm the most honest with myself and still somehow the most wrong. It starts reasonable. $12 for a meal. But then the fees show up. Service, delivery, tip. Suddenly it's $27 and I'm nodding along like that was always the plan. I did the math once. Kind of accidentally. Twice a week didn't feel excessive. It felt like surviving. But twice a week turns into 8 times a month. 8 times 27 is over $200. Over a year, that's more than $2,500. Saying it out loud felt worse than seeing it on a screen. Not because I couldn't afford food, but because I couldn't remember most of the meals. I remembered being tired. I remembered wanting it to be easy. The money part didn't hurt in the moment. It hurt later, when it lined up neatly and refused to look small anymore. Gas stations get me every time, and it's never the gas. It's the drink you grab because you're already there. The snack that sounds good for about 3 minutes. $4, $6, sometimes $10 if you're feeling generous with yourself. It always feels like pocket change. I've never once regretted a gas station purchase in the moment, but I started noticing how often I couldn't remember what I bought. If you spend $8 twice a week, that's over $800 a year. $800 on things you barely recall enjoying. That's the part that sits weird. I don't feel guilty about it. I feel confused. Like I traded something solid for a bunch of forgettable moments. I told myself it didn't count because it was small. But small, repeated enough times, starts to feel deliberate, even if it never felt intentional. Upgrades are sneaky because they feel like progress. The bigger coffee, the premium version, the add-on that's only $1.50 more. I almost never say no to those. $1.50 doesn't trigger anything in me, but 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, that's close to $400. $400 to make something slightly better. for a few minutes at a time. When I realized that, my first reaction wasn't regret. It was defensiveness. I wanted to explain it. I wanted to justify it. That's usually a sign. I wasn't mad at the money. I was uncomfortable with how automatic the choice had become. I didn't decide to upgrade anymore. I just did. And when decisions stop feeling like decisions, they start piling up quietly in the background. Credit cards make everything feel smooth. Too smooth. You tap, you swipe, you move on. There's no pause where your brain goes, wait, am I okay with this? The pause comes later, when the balance shows up like a summary you don't remember writing. I've caught myself being surprised by numbers that were entirely my doing. That's a strange feeling. It's like recognizing your own handwriting, but not remembering the day you wrote it. The minimum payment looks manageable. The interest doesn't. I used to blame prices, inflation, bad luck. But when I slowed down enough to look, the pattern was familiar. It wasn't one big mistake. It was a bunch of small ones that never felt like mistakes at all. Sales mess with my head more than full prices. If something's $80 but was $100, I feel like I'm winning, even if I never planned to spend $80 in the first place. I've brought things home because the discount felt smart, not because the item mattered. Later, when it sits unused, the math flips. I didn't save 20. I spent 80. That realization doesn't land immediately. It creeps in when you start noticing how many good deals didn't change anything about your day. I've got a few of those sitting around. Not enough to feel dramatic. Just enough to make me hesitate the next time a red price tag tries to convince me I'm being responsible. Monthly payments are comforting in a dangerous way. $39 a month sounds harmless. So does $29. Stack a few of those together, and suddenly a chunk of your future is already spoken for. I remember adding mine up once and feeling this quiet tightening in my chest. Not panic, more like realization that money was gone before it arrived. I hadn't noticed because nothing ever felt expensive. It just felt occupied. There's something unsettling about knowing how much of your income is already promised to things you don't think about anymore. It makes the month feel smaller. Even if the numbers technically work, convenience fees are everywhere now, and I barely register them. A few dollars to save a few minutes, a charge to skip a line, a fee to make something faster. When I added them up over a year, it wasn't the total that bothered me. It was how little I remembered the time I supposedly saved. I couldn't point to a single moment where I thought, wow, that fee really improved my life. It just smoothed things out temporarily. And smoothing things out costs more than it seems. Not enough to feel painful, just enough to feel persistent. Spending with friends is tricky because it doesn't feel like spending. It feels like participating. Matching the pace. Saying yes because everyone else did. I've had nights where I spent more than I meant to without ever making a conscious choice. It wasn't pressure exactly, it was momentum. Later, when the credit card statement shows up, the feelings are mixed. The memory is good. The number isn't. I don't regret the people. I question the autopilot. There's a difference, and it took me a while to notice it. Groceries are where optimism gets expensive. I shop like I'm going to cook every meal every night with energy and focus. Then the week happens. Things spoil. Bags get thrown out. If you waste $20 a week, that's over $1,000 a year. $1,000 on food you plan to be someone else eating. That realization stings a little. Not because of the money, but because it's a quiet mismatch between intention and reality. I wasn't careless, I was hopeful. And hope apparently has a price. The small fees bother me the most because they buy nothing. Late fees, interest charges, bank fees that show up without explanation. They're usually small enough that I sigh and move on. But when I added them up, it was a few $100s a year. A few hundred for absolutely nothing. That's when annoyance turns inward. I wasn't mad at the system. I was mad that I let background noise become a line item. It's hard to feel good about paying for forgetfulness. Late night online shopping is less about stuff and more about distraction. I've bought things half asleep that felt important for about 12 seconds. The anticipation was the best part. The package arriving was almost awkward, like meeting someone you don't remember texting. If that happens a couple times a month at $40 a pop, that's nearly $1,000 a year. $1,000 chasing a feeling that disappears before the box is even opened. I didn't feel reckless doing it. I felt bored. That might be worse. I avoided tracking my spending for a long time, not because I didn't know how, but because I didn't want to see it all together. This is the part I didn't want to look at first. Seeing patterns makes them harder to ignore. Individual purchases are easy to explain. Patterns aren't. When everything lines up, it stops being about circumstances and starts being about habits. I remember closing the app the first time and just sitting there, no action, no plan, just a low, steady discomfort, like realizing you've been telling yourself a story that doesn't quite hold up anymore. Lifestyle creep doesn't announce itself. It just quietly takes the extra. I made more money at one point and expected relief. What I got was nicer versions of the same stress. Expenses expanded to meet the moment, not because I planned it, but because I didn't resist it. Raises came and went. The feeling stayed. That was confusing. I thought progress was supposed to feel different. Instead, it just felt fuller, more crowded. Like the money was busy doing other things before it could help me relax. Reward spending used to feel special. Now it feels routine. I tell myself I deserve something for getting through the week. Then the week ended, and I needed another reward to get through the next one. When rewards become normal, they stop feeling rewarding. They just become another expense with a better excuse. I didn't notice when that shift happened. I only noticed when the satisfaction stopped showing up, but the charges didn't. I've caught myself comparing my situation to worse ones as a way to feel okay. At least I'm not broke. At least the bills are paid. That thinking is comforting, but it's also expensive. It makes drifting feel acceptable. It turns fine into a destination. I wasn't failing. I just wasn't paying attention, and not paying attention has a cost that doesn't show up all at once. When I finally stacked everything together, the number surprised me. Not because it was unbelievable, but because it was believable. A few hundred here, a couple thousand there. By the time I was done, it was somewhere between $7,000 and $9,000 a year. That's not a disaster. It's just heavy. It's vacations not taken. It's time bought back. It's options. I didn't rush to fix it. I just let the number sit. Numbers do that. They don't yell. They just exist. I keep thinking about a $5 habit I've had for years. $5 doesn't register, but over 30 years, that's more than $50,000. $50,000 spread thin enough to never feel real. I don't say that to scare myself. I say it because it explains a lot. The feeling of working hard and still wondering where it all went. I don't have a clean ending for this. Just that image. $5 at a time. Quiet. Steady. Adding up while I was busy thinking about other things.